Anna McMorran.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Anna McMorran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am shocked and angered at workers in UK clothing factories like Boohoo being paid a mere £3.50 an hour and being forced to work in totally unacceptable conditions. In the 21st century, there must be no room for exploitation and modern slavery. We must call time on fast fashion for the sake of people and our planet. So my question is simple, Mr. Speaker. What will the Prime Minister do about it?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, it's this Conservative government that set up laws against modern slavery. It's this Conservative government that massively increased the living wage, not only instituted the living wage, but massively increased it. And we would hope that it would be the Labour Mayor of Leicester who would stand up for the interests of the workforce in his community, and that's what we will do.
We're heading to the shadows of Lichfield Cathedral with Michael Fabricant. Michael Fabricant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's not just the 800-year-old Lichfield Cathedral that we have. We've also got the beautiful leafy lanes, wonderful restaurants and bars. But I tell you what we also have, and that is the Lichfield Garrick, which is a major theatre in the area, the Hub at St Mary's. And so what I'd like to know is this. I welcome the £1.7 billion grant that's being given to support our theatres and performing artists. But are we going to see any of it at all outside of the West End and here in Lichfield?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend. I can tell him that Lichfield has been at the centre of our cultural life since Dr. Johnson and David Garrick made their famous walk and ride from Lichfield to London in the 18th century, and will continue to be so. And we are working closely with Arts Council England to support and develop the projects that I know are so dear to his heart.
Present to Leader of the Opposition with the Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, when asked why care home deaths had been so high, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Too many care homes didn't really follow the procedures in the way that they could have." That's caused huge offence to frontline care workers. It's now been 48 hours. Will the Prime Minister apologise to care workers?
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman, and the last thing I want to do is to blame care workers for what has happened, or for any of them to think that I was blaming them, because they worked hard, incredibly hard throughout this crisis, looking after some of the most vulnerable people in our country and doing an outstanding job. And as he knows, tragically, 257 of them have lost their lives. And when it comes to taking blame, I take full responsibility for what has happened. But the one thing that nobody knew early on during this pandemic was that the virus was being passed asymptomatically from person to person in the way that it is. And that's why the guidance and the procedures changed. And it's thanks to the hard work of care workers that we've now got incidents down in our care homes, outbreaks down in our care homes to the lowest level since the crisis began. That's thanks to our care workers, and I pay tribute to them.
Mr. Speaker, that's not an apology, and it just won't wash. The Prime Minister said, his words, too many care homes didn't really follow the procedures in the way that they could have. It was clear what he was saying, and the Prime Minister must understand just how raw this is for many people on the front line and for those, Mr. Speaker, who've lost loved ones. I quote Mark Adams, who runs a social care charity, who spoke yesterday. He said this: "You've got 1.6 million social care workers going into work to protect our parents, our grandparents, our children, putting their own health and potentially lives at risk. And then, to get perhaps the most senior man in the country turning round and blaming them on what has been an absolute travesty of leadership from the government, I just think it's appalling." They're his words. Ask the Prime Minister again, will he apologise to care workers, yes or no?
Speaker, he keeps saying that I blamed or tried to blame care workers, and that is simply not the case. The reality is that we now know things about the way a coronavirus is passed from person to person without symptoms that we just didn't know. That's why we instituted the Care Home Action Plan on April the 15th. That's why we changed the procedures. And perhaps he did know that it was being transmitted asymmetrically. I didn't hear it at the time. Perhaps Captain Hindsight would like to tell us whether he knew that it was being transmitted asymmetrically. Of course, it was necessary to change our procedures. I want to thank our care workers for what they have done, and this government will continue to invest massively in our care homes, in our care workers. And by the way, it's this government that put up, as I said just now, this government that put up the living wage by record amounts. And that is something that we can do directly to help every care worker in the country.
Keir Starmer.
By refusing to apologise, the Prime Minister rubs salt into the wounds of the very people that he stood at his front door and clapped. The Prime Minister and the Health Secretary must be the only people left in the country who think that they put a protective ring around care homes. Those on the front line know that that wasn't the case. I quote one care home manager from ITN News yesterday. She said this: "I'm absolutely livid at the fact that he says we didn't follow the procedures, because the care assistants, the nurses, everyone in the care home have worked so hard, and then he's got the audacity to blame us." Her words. What would the Prime Minister like to say to that care home manager?
What I would like to say to the lady in question, and indeed to every care home worker in the country, is that this government appreciates the incredible work that they have done. We thank them for the incredible work they have done. And let me say further that we will invest in our care homes and we will reform the care home sector. And I hope, by the way, Mr. Speaker, that we'll do it on the basis of cross-party consensus and get a lasting solution to the problems in our care homes and the difficulties many people face in funding the cost of their old age. That's what we want to do. That's what this government is pledged to do after 30 years of inaction, and I hope that he will join us in doing it.
Keir Starmer.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I gently point out that his government has been in power for 10 years with no plan and no white paper. Of course we'll join in plans for reforming healthcare, but for social care, but 10 years wasted. The reality is this: more than 19,000 care home residents have died from COVID-19. It's a far higher number when you include excess deaths. Overall, around 1 in 20 care home residents are estimated to have died from the virus. 1 in 20. It's chilling. These are extraordinary numbers. Yet the Prime Minister has consistently ducked responsibility for this. Will he accept it isn't care workers who are to blame, it's his government?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know. I think he's got the old vice of reading out the pre-prepared question without listening to the answer I've just given. I've made it absolutely clear that this government takes responsibility for everything that we've done throughout this crisis, and of course I pay tribute once again to the work of every care worker in the country, and I thank them. But what we've also done is put forward a care home action plan that has helped our care workers, our care home industry, to get the incidence of coronavirus right down in every care home in the country to the lowest level. And we're now putting in monthly testing for every resident in our care home and weekly testing for every care home worker. And that is thanks to the fantastic efforts of everybody involved in NHS testing and tracing. And I think, by the way, he should pay tribute to them as well.
Yes, Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister continues to insult those on the front line by not taking these issues seriously. The Prime Minister must recognise that huge mistakes have been made. 2 months ago, at PMQs, I highlighted the weakness of early guidance on care homes. The Prime Minister, typically flippant, simply said it's not true. There were repeated warnings from the care sector, repeated delays in providing protective equipment. This wasn't hindsight. They were raised here day in, day out, week in, week out. It wasn't hindsight, it was real time for the front line. Same on routine testing. And the decision to discharge 25,000 people to care homes without tests was clearly a mistake. Will the Prime Minister simply accept that his government was just too slow to act on care homes? Full stop.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman knows very well, or he should know very well, that the understanding of the disease changed dramatically in the months that we've had it, and when he looks at the action plan that we brought in to help our care workers, I think he would appreciate the vast amount of work that they have done, the PPE that they've been supplied with, the testing that they've been supplied with. That has helped them to get the incidence of the disease down to record lows. And it has enabled us to get on with our work as the government in getting this country through this epidemic, getting this country back on its feet. That's what this country wants to see. We've stuck to our plan to open up our economy gradually and cautiously. One week he's in favour of it, the next week he's against it. What this country wants to see is a steady, stable approach to getting our country back on its feet. That is what we are delivering.
5 minutes.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, to add further insult to injury, there are reports this morning that the government is to remove free hospital parking for NHS workers in England. The Prime Minister will know that this could cost hundreds of pounds a month for our nurses, our doctors, our carers and our support staff. We owe our NHS workers so much. We all clap for them. We should be rewarding them, not making it more expensive to go to work. The Prime Minister must know this is wrong. Will he reconsider and rule it out?
Mr. Speaker, the hospital car parks are free for NHS staff for this pandemic. They're free now, and we are going to get on with our manifesto commitment to make them free for patients who need them as well. And the House will know that that was never the case under the Labour government. Neither for staff, nor for patients. May I respectfully suggest that he takes his latest bandwagon and parks it free somewhere else, Mr. Speaker. One week he's backing us, the next week he's not. One week he's in favour of a tax on wealth and tax on homes. The next week he tries to tiptoe away from it. We know how it works. He takes one brief one week, one brief the next. He's consistent only in his opportunism, whereas we get on with our agenda. Build for jobs, and the House will hear more about it shortly, Mr. Speaker.